What is up, gang? Thank y'all for tuning back in with us. We heading into another Mr. Ballin reaction because y'all just love when we react to these and y'all be down there agreeing or disagreeing with me. Calm down. Moving and stuff.
He's so stupid.
But this one was sent by somebody in the comments. You actually sent two of these, so we gonna react to both of you. You gonna know who you is.
Calm down.
Not in the same video. But this one is the man. This man's secret shocked the world. He shocked the world, dude, Craig. The world. All right, I might jump to conclusion. Y'all know how I get down. I might, if it's a mystery, I'm solving it before it happens. So y'all gonna bear with me. Don't come in here talking about I'm blaming whoever. Find a detective. Y'all know I'm gonna blame whoever. I don't know what D doing, but I'm blaming whoever.
I'm going with the truth.
I'm blaming whoever looked guilty at the time.
I'm going with the facts.
They guilty.
On August 28th, 1984, an 18-year-old girl named Elizabeth went missing. On the first day she was gone, her friends and family went out looking for her, but they couldn't find her. The following day, when she still hadn't shown up and no one had heard from her, her parents went to the local police station in their Austrian town of Amstetten, which is about an hour west of Vienna, and they reported her missing.
Why do I feel like people back in the day just look so much older?
No, she looked 18.
Like when they was like in high school, they was grown-ups already.
No, that's how that is now.
No,
I feel
you
like...
ain't seen NBA players and all that. They was like 19 looking 48.
Yeah, but I feel like now.
Back then, it was. I think they had hormones and they stuff. They talking about us. No, y'all back in the day.
Now the new generation, they look way older.
You talking about body? I'm talking about face.
Face too.
Back then, they looked like they was 50 in high school. Mustache way out here, like they look old as hell. Bald spots already balding.
He's saying that because he still ain't been able to grow mustache.
I don't want to look old. I don't want to look old. I like the ID me still. I like walking in there like, yeah, let me check your ID, please. Please check my ID. I don't want you walking there saying, yeah, we know how old you look. Go ahead, don't even worry about it.
The police launched an initial search of the town and the surrounding areas, but after several weeks, they had found nothing that connected to Elizabeth and where she might have gone. A month after she had been reported missing, her parents came back to the police station, except this time they were carrying a note they say they received in the mail from their missing daughter. It was postmarked from a town that was about 2 hours west of Amstetten, and in this note, Elizabeth writes directly to her parents, and she tells them that she had grown tired of living with them, and she did not want them to come looking for her, and if she discovered they were looking for her, she would just flee the country. After the police read the note, they asked the parents if they thought it was real, if this was a legitimate letter from their daughter, and they said, yeah, they think it is. And then after that, her father, Joseph, suggested that...
No, it's time to play early detective. And don't y'all say nothing. Don't y'all say nothing, because I'm playing early detective today.
I think what's tripping me out is the fact that they say, yeah, they believe it's real. Like, so is there something that happened in the household?
What if he forced her to write it? Like, you could,
no,
it could be
I'm saying, like,
but I'm saying my early detective, like, somebody can force you to write something. It could be your handwriting. Of course, they're gonna say yes.
You're right. But they believe that it's her, meaning how she said, like, living with him was horrible, whatever. But
they probably asked. I'm pretty sure he went off.
Are you gonna let me tell my stuff?
Tell your stuff. Tell your stuff.
You gotta let me. You gotta let me.
You're going off of believing that you're going too deep already.
I'm saying something was going on in that house for them to say yes, that's her writing it. Because
I don't think they going off.
Only she would know how it feels to live in that house. Obviously, if they want to go find her, she's gonna feel like she has to flee even worse. So my thing is, she don't want to be found.
I highly doubt they're going off of the letter being true. I think they're going off of handwriting here. You're going to ID it by the handwriting, not by what she put in there.
Do you think this is her? They said yes.
Handwriting, probably.
That maybe his daughter had run off to join a cult. That was something he thought she was getting into before her disappearance. After the parents left the police station, the police began conducting interviews with other family members and friends of Elizabeth to see if it was possible that she might have run off to join a cult. And virtually everyone they spoke to said, absolutely not. There is no way she ran off to join a cult. That just wasn't her. She was a quiet, reserved person, and they had never heard her talking about a cult or anything that even resembled.
I know where this is going.
Don't even start.
I know this. I know it. I know it, but I'm not gonna say it. But I know it.
You probably saw someone on TikTok. Don't act like you out here playing.
No, I'm just going off of
crime solvers.
No, the parents are behind it, or the dad's behind it. Watch. How much you want to bet? Do you want to bet? Shake on camera.
Because I haven't even I got to get my facts together. Let me get my stuff together first.
I already called it.
These answers left the police feeling very suspicious of the whole situation, and so they decided to look into the young woman's history to see if there was some other reason she might have run off. In their research, they discovered that Elizabeth was one of 7 siblings that all lived together with their parents, Joseph and Rose Marie. Joseph was a successful electrical engineer and real estate developer who was well-liked and respected in town, and Rose Marie had gotten married very young at the age of 17, and she had stayed home to take care of the kids. By all accounts, from the outside looking in, they were a very ordinary family. But as the police began to dig deeper and deeper into their history, they discovered there were some big problems behind closed doors. Despite his friendly, outward public appearance, Joseph was actually a ruthless authoritarian when he was home alone with his family. At night, when he came home from work, his wife and his kids would immediately stop whatever they were doing and go silent in hopes they might avoid a beating. The only member of the family that seemed willing to stand up to Joseph was Elizabeth, and she and her father would frequently get into screaming fights, and then as punishment for these fights, Joseph would not only beat his daughter, he would also prevent her from seeing her friends for long periods of time, and he would go through her personal things like her diary.
Joseph.
She told her friends. That's why they don't believe it. That is why they don't believe it, because true friends, she tells them what's going on in that house, so the friends are going to come forward and be like, well, she did mention blah, 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 blah.
Joseph is out here just... But if I would have said something, when I say I feel like somebody guilty, they come for me. So I didn't even want to guilt trip nobody this early.
That's your problem.
Their toxic relationship finally came to a head when Elizabeth finally ran away from home 2 years prior to her most recent disappearance. She made it all the way to Vienna before authorities caught up to her and brought her back home. Upon learning about this earlier disappearance, the police became convinced that the most recent disappearance was yet another attempt to escape her abusive and controlling father. And so the police decided that this was more of a family affair, and they didn't push the investigation further. A year went by, and neither the police nor her family heard anything from Elizabeth, and so her case was closed. But 24 years later, a seemingly unconnected event broke her case wide open. On April 19th, 2008, a 19-year-old named Kirsten was rushed to the hospital in Amstetten. Her skin was so pale it looked almost transparent. She was unconscious and suffering from seizures as well as lung and kidney failure. The doctors were able to stabilize her by putting her into a medically induced coma, but after running a litany of tests, they couldn't figure out what was causing her to have this medical condition, and so they were not able to treat her effectively. They assumed it had to be some sort of genetic condition, so they put her name into the medical database, but nothing came up. Her name wasn't listed. And so this was very perplexing because everybody's name was in this database. And so they took her name and they ran it in other medical databases.
Did the daughter have a child?
Dang, you speculating deep.
A
child?
Look.
That's crazy. This is a 20-year secret, so you know, it can go many places. That I can't speculate this early on this one yet. I can't do it. I need a couple more.
I'm asking.
I need a couple of more card facts before I start saying something.
And her name didn't show up in any of them. And so totally confused by this girl who seemingly didn't exist, who was exhibiting symptoms of a condition none of the doctors had seen before, the doctors decide they have to speak to the guy she showed up with, an older man who was out in the waiting room. When the doctors approached him, he said he was Kirsten's grandfather, but beyond that, he offered virtually no new information. In fact, he was aggressive and rude and dismissive, and anytime they asked him questions, he would answer as minimally as possible. And when the doctors really fixated on whether or not Kirsten had some underlying medical condition, he would not give them an answer. He would just dismiss it and say he didn't know anything, but it was the doctor's impression that he did know something, he just didn't want to tell them. And this behavior shocked them because they're thinking the information he has could potentially save his granddaughter's life. Why wouldn't he want to give it to us? And so after this disastrous interaction with the grandfather, the doctors decide to get the police involved. There were just too many red flags not to. When the police arrived, they were surprised to find out that this older man in the waiting room was none other than Joseph, the father of the still missing girl, Elizabeth. The police asked Joseph, "What's going on here?" And he tells them that earlier that day, he had opened his front door of his house, and lying on his front step was a girl he had never seen before.
Joseph just looked creepy, though.
He do.
Joseph, don't like the same Joseph they showed. Joseph looked creepy.
He do. Sorry, not
like
to
he
judge.
giving.
Not to judge. But...
No, I'm judging. I'm gonna judge because he already committed a crime. So I'm gonna judge.
You don't even know what done.
We gonna find out. This story been out. This ain't like we find out fresh news. I'm gonna judge. Joseph look weird.
Go.
Don't come tell me judging. He already been judged.
Kirsten, and there was a note laying on her from his missing daughter, Elizabeth. In the note, Elizabeth writes to Joseph directly and tells him, this girl here is Kirsten, and she is my daughter, so she's your granddaughter, and she's sick, and I can't take care of her. Can you and Mom take her to the hospital? While the police had many more questions about this totally bizarre turn of events, they realized that for the time being, they needed to focus their efforts on just getting Elizabeth to contact them, because they needed to know more about Kirsten's medical condition so they could save her life. And so the police went to the media and they put out a message on TV and on radio that was a direct appeal to Elizabeth that basically said, we need you to come forward as soon as possible and speak to us so we can help save your daughter's life. And all the messages worked, because a week later, Elizabeth, along with her father, Joseph, showed up at the hospital where Kirsten was staying. When
Elizabeth pulled up though. But speculation time. I am now ready to.
It's their child.
They was fooling around and probably listened.
She probably didn't like
not deny it.
No, she probably was forced. She probably was. How's she go missing?
20-year secret. 20-year secret.
No. So my thing is, was he hiding her? Was he keeping her, torturing her?
You're not about to act like it can't be a answer. You know what I'm saying? Don't act like. Look, this is sounding a little bit.
No, I don't think it was.
You always trying to throw my stuff out.
Choice.
Why are you always trying to throw my stuff
because
out?
It don't make sense. Go.
How it don't make sense?
It's getting too good.
How it don't make sense?
Hurry up.
doctors asked, Joseph did not get into detail about how he actually located Elizabeth. He simply said he found her and now she wants to see her daughter. The doctors noticed that Elizabeth, who was supposed to be in her early 40s, looked like she could easily be in her 60s.
Exactly.
Her hair was completely white and her skin was so pale it was almost transparent, just like they had noticed about her daughter's skin. And so after they checked in, Joseph and Elizabeth made their way to Kirsten's room, and the pair went inside, and the doctors that were in there would say that Elizabeth looked terrified. She was hunched over and kind of slouched down, and she wouldn't make eye contact with any of the doctors. And as she was standing there looking at her terribly sick daughter, the doctors began asking her, do you know of any underlying health problems your daughter might have that might help us treat her more effectively? And
it's because he kept them locked up. They never came outside. That's why their skin looks like that. He kept them locked up. I know it.
Whose child is it?
Theirs.
Elizabeth was so scared she couldn't even talk, and at some point the questions became too much for her, and she just turned around and walked out into the hall with Joseph. And once they got out into the hall, the police were waiting for them. They had been tipped off as soon as the doctors saw Joseph and Elizabeth come into the hospital. Elizabeth and Joseph were detained and brought to the police station, where they were put in 2 separate rooms to be interviewed. They first interviewed Elizabeth, and initially, just like in the hospital room, she was totally mute and didn't say anything. And for 5 hours, the police grilled her with questions. Where had she been for the last 24 years? What happened to Kirsten? Did she have something to do with her illness? And they kept reminding her throughout these 5 hours that if she never gave them any information, and God forbid something were to happen to Kirsten, she, Elizabeth, could be held criminally liable. And so eventually Elizabeth, in a very small, meek voice, said, okay, I'll tell you the story, but you have to promise me I never have to see my father, Joseph, ever again. When she said this to the police, they could tell she was so scared that they said, okay, fine. You never have to see your father again. We'll make sure of it. Now tell us what happened. After that, Elizabeth clutched her hands. She took a deep breath, and then she told them one of the most horrifying stories they had ever heard. A story so disturbing that it would make headlines all around the world for months. It all began 24 years earlier on August 28, 1984, the day Elizabeth went missing. On that day, she told police she was at her family home in Amstetten when her father asked her to come into the basement to help him with something. Her father, for the last several years, had been constructing a bomb shelter in their basement, and he was now only one door installation away from being done. At the time, in the early 1980s, the Cold War was still very much on, and so building bomb shelters inside of your home was a relatively common thing. So Elizabeth goes down into her basement and she sees her father.
Building bomb shelters? Where they live there building bomb shelters?
father standing in front of this empty frame where this door is going to go that leads into the shelter. And so she walks over and steps through the frame into the shelter. She turns around and her father hands her this door, and she holds it in the middle of the frame while he secures it to the hinges. And then once it's securely in place, suddenly he swings open the door, knocking Elizabeth backwards farther into the shelter. And before she could stand back up again, her father had run inside and pushed an ether-soaked towel onto her face, knocking her unconscious. When she came to again, she found herself chained up in the very back room of the shelter. It would turn out this bomb shelter that Joseph had spent 6 years constructing was not actually a bomb shelter. It was a prison he was building specifically for Elizabeth. To get into this shelter, you would have to go down the steps into the basement, which looked like a typical unfinished basement. And then on the far wall, you would see these shelves that had things like paint cans and screwdrivers and other tools you would expect to find in a basement. But if you walked over to the left side of the shelving, there was a lock on the back of it that if you undid it, the shelf itself would swing out like a door, and then behind it on the wall would reveal a 3-foot-tall secret door. This secret door was also locked, but not by a key lock. Instead, it was locked by a keypad lock that only Joseph had the code to. And since Joseph was an electrical engineer, he took great care in ensuring this lock never could be tampered with or destroyed. That thing was going to stay locked unless he unlocked it. When Joseph entered his code into the keypad, he could open that secret door and it would reveal this secret underground prison that was basically a winding maze of small rooms with ceilings that were too short to be able to stand up all the way in. If you
Oh, so that's why she was like hunched over. So he was down there like planning this for years for his daughter.
Think of nothing. Okay.
But it was a bomb shelter, yeah. And back then, most wives ain't gonna go down there, you know, checking on what you doing and what you got. And if she could still lie and be like, "Oh, honey, just in case we got rooms," and you know,
that's sad.
You ain't gonna think that he about to tie your daughter up.
That's sad.
Walked through this secret door and actually entered into this prison, you would start by entering this soundproof narrow hallway that went on for several feet before it entered into this very small bathroom area where the bathroom was unbelievably cramped and there was no doors, there was no privacy. And then if you didn't stop in the bathroom and you just kept walking straight through that first hallway, you would reach another hallway that was totally soundproof and narrow, and at the end of that hallway it would feed into a very small bedroom that was so small that it barely contained the one bed that was inside of it. And then off to the right side of that bedroom was another door that led into a similarly sized bedroom. All of the walls of this underground prison were made of thick reinforced concrete. That, combined with the soundproofing that Joseph had installed throughout the entire prison, meant no one could hear Elizabeth's cries for help. Also, the inside of the prison was heavily monitored by Joseph's security system. So truly, Elizabeth had absolutely no privacy. She was completely trapped, and the only way she was getting out was if her father freed her. For the first 5 years of her imprisonment, she remained in that dungeon all alone. Her only connection to the outside world was her father, who would come down almost every night to drop off basic supplies and to assault her.
This is crazy. This is wild work. Right.
But I only say that because this sounds like something that I've watched, but I don't know. Because remember that one documentary we watched, In the Room? Was that a stranger or was that somebody that he knew? Remember the one where it was like the little boy and he finally made it out? It was In the Room. And it was in his house though. But this one sounds the same. It was called In the Room, I think, or like that. Or it's called Room. I
think that might have been different. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but this one sounds like this. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I felt like this one was kind of like in a way, like it kind of gave it away because it just.
But I don't remember hearing.
I watched so many.
But I don't remember hearing no story about nobody being hunched or nothing like that or old.
Yeah, well, it's not that she's old. It's just that
I'm not saying she aged, but I don't remember nobody.
The circumstances.
Yeah, I don't remember nothing like that.
I feel like I've either seen a Lifetime movie like this or seen a documentary or docuseries. It's something because it's like in my head of what it is, but I don't know.
As far as Joseph's wife and his other kids knew, he was just spending all this time in the basement because that's where he worked when he was not at the office. In 1988, Elizabeth became pregnant with her father's child. She was terrified of the pregnancy and begged Joseph to at least allow her to deliver the child in a hospital. But he refused. He wasn't willing to potentially expose himself for what he was doing. And so he gave her a book about childbirth, and he gave her a pair of scissors to cut the umbilical cord, and he said, "Good luck." And so on August 30th, Elizabeth delivered her daughter, Kirsten, alone in that basement. Following the birth of Kirsten, Elizabeth would deliver 6 more of her father's children, all the same way she delivered Kirsten, alone and in the basement. In 1996, one of Elizabeth's newborn babies, Michael, was born with respiratory issues, and so Elizabeth pleaded with Joseph to take the baby to the hospital to get help, but Joseph refused. He was worried he would be...
I think it is Room. I think it is Room.
I don't remember what it was called, but...
I think it was that. I don't remember. I don't know.
But if it is that, I don't remember them telling the story about her looking older or anything like that. That's what I'm saying. They leaving out key parts. That's what I'm saying. When documentaries and stuff be doing stuff, they leaving stuff out.
She did look sick, but as far as like
or hunched, like they couldn't walk in there and nothing like that. They didn't say nothing like that.
And stuff, they didn't specify that. But
they didn't say the ceilings was short and all that stuff.
Yeah. True.
Exposed. And so 3 days after his birth, the baby died in Elizabeth's arms. And after the baby died, Joseph just took the body, threw it in a stove, and incinerated it like it was nothing. In the late 90s, the 6 living children down in the basement were getting bigger and noisier, and so Joseph came up with a plan in order to reduce the chances of them being discovered. And so one day, Joseph went downstairs into the basement, and he took one of Elizabeth's youngest children away from her. And then he threatened her and the rest of the kids down there that if they tried to fight back or if they ever tried to escape, he would seal off the basement and he would gas them to death. Previously, Joseph had punished the entire family by turning off their power and cutting off their food and water supply for multiple days at a time. So they knew he was willing and able to hurt them if he wanted to. And so when he took this young child away from Elizabeth, they didn't put up a fight and the baby disappeared upstairs. And when Joseph's wife, Rosemary, came home, he put on this elaborate charade about how he had discovered this baby on the front step and that there was a note attached to the baby and it was from Elizabeth, their missing daughter, and this child was apparently Elizabeth's and she couldn't take care of it and she was leaving it here for he and Rosemary to raise it as their own. And Joseph had actually made Elizabeth write out this note and sign it to add credibility to the story. And so when Elizabeth's mother, Rosemary, saw this note and heard Joseph's story, she believed it. Over the next several years, Joseph would steal 2 more of Elizabeth's young children and then stage having found them on his front step.
See, now there's multiple stages now. Wife got to start using her antennas or something to start saying that.
But it's in a sense like, at least she probably felt like, well, at least she's giving it to us. She knows they're in good hands.
Yeah, but I don't know.
So it's like, as a grandmother, she probably felt like that. And like, okay, I'd rather, but then it's just like.
Yeah, it's a little.
That's so sad. But I bet she was comfortable because she knew, like, okay, at least he's taking care of them. Yeah. But then it's just like, if you can do this to me, what makes you think you can't do it to them? Like, it's like one of those.
Crazy.
That is sad.
There's some sick people in the world, man.
With a note from Elizabeth, and with each discovered child, Rosemary amazingly never asked any questions. She just took these kids in, and she and Joseph raised them as their own. Eventually, when these 3 kids got old enough, Joseph would tell them that their real mother, Elizabeth, was a lowlife, and she had abandoned them, and she didn't care about them, when in reality, their mother and their other 3 siblings they didn't know existed were locked up in the basement below their feet. Initially, investigators believed all of these children Joseph had with Elizabeth were all mistakes, but it would turn out that was not the case. Joseph would admit that the reason he initially imprisoned Elizabeth was because he wanted to completely control her. He wanted to own her. And so he decided that if he could just impregnate her as many times as possible and make her have all these kids, even if she eventually got out of the prison, no man would want her. She had too many kids, and so she would remain his property. What? And so over the entire time Elizabeth was imprisoned, over 2 decades, the nightly assaults by her father never slowed down. They happened thousands of times. But despite the horrific and tragic circumstances surrounding each of her children's births, she loved her children unconditionally and would spend all of her time doing her best to educate them and care for them. The 3 children that remained with her, that were not taken by Joseph, she taught them how to read and how to write. And when Joseph had given them a TV and a radio to keep down there, she would use those 2 items to try to teach her kids about the outside world, and she would promise them that someday they would get to experience it for real. Finally, in 2008, so 24 years after Elizabeth had originally been captured by her father.
So 24. So she was 18 when they caught her, when she went missing.
Somewhere around that. 16.
I think it was 18. It's like 18, but plus 24.
She was 30,
I'm trying
42,
to think.
I think.
I'm not that fast, huh?
42, I think.
But then how old was he? He had to be super old, though.
or 46, somewhere out there.
But I'm saying, like, if it was,
he had to be old.
He had to be old. So my thing, I'm like, you could have beat him up or something, or, you know, I'm just saying, like, I get
it.
it.
The fear though, it's like you gotta think being down there so long, and you know, he said he gonna gas you out. You ain't gonna take the risk. Like,
yeah, that's true. That's so.
She was
sad.
technically like groomed. Like you ain't gonna.
Her oldest daughter, Kirsten, becomes extremely sick, and Elizabeth convinces Joseph to bring her to the hospital. And 1 week later, Joseph's heinous crimes were revealed to the world. Once police found out about the secret prison, they rushed to the house, and they went downstairs, and they used the codes and instructions that Joseph had given them, and they went inside, and they freed the last...
Hold on, he gave it to them? He gave them.
Well, he told her he already controlled her life. Like no man gonna want her. He already basically did what he said he was gonna do. He messed like that. That's gonna mess her up the rest of her life.
Damn, but he just gave in.
Last two remaining children that were still there. When they brought them to the hospital, the youngest of these two kids, who was 5 years old, he didn't speak the entire time. He just pressed his face up against the glass of the car window, and he stared out in utter amazement, because to that point in his life, he had never actually seen the world. After those two kids were brought to the hospital, they were reunited with the other three siblings that had been taken away from them years ago to live upstairs with Joseph and Rosemary. And apparently the reunion was very emotional, and the kids were extremely happy to see each other. And then a couple days later, Kirsten would come out of her coma, and she too would have a chance to be reunited with all of her siblings. Kirsten would ultimately make a full recovery. It would turn out she was suffering from a severe vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D you primarily get from the sun, and in her 19 years of life, she had never been in the sun. As soon as the story broke about this family being trapped inside of this basement, everybody had the same question. How could Elizabeth's mother, Rosemary, not know what was going on in her basement? But the police had the same suspicions about Rosemary, and they investigated her, and they ruled her out. And they said she's not at fault here, she's a victim too. She had been so badly abused by Joseph that she lived in fear of him. And so when he forbade her from ever going anywhere near the basement, she listened. And if she ever heard any strange sounds coming out of the basement, or if she ever suspected any strange behavior by Joseph, she kept those thoughts to herself because she was scared. It's also worth noting that in those 24 years that Elizabeth and her kids were trapped in the basement, Joseph had over 100 people rent out a room inside of his house that was right over the basement. And in those 24 years, not one of those tenants ever said Joseph was acting strangely or complained about strange noises coming from the basement. However, one tenant who was there for a 4-year stretch had a dog with him the whole time, and every night the dog at some point would suddenly stand up, its ears would prick up, and it would start growling like it heard or it saw something. And at first, this tenant would try to see what the dog had seen or heard, but after never seeing anything, he would always just dismiss the dog when it did this at night. Later on, when that tenant figured out what was actually happening inside the house while he was there, he realized his dog was most likely hearing the faint sounds of the family that was imprisoned right below him. After a year of therapy and rehabilitation, Elizabeth and her 6 kids were given new identities by the Austrian government, and they were sent off to a secret location to start their lives over. As such, there's virtually no information about how they're doing today. However, anonymous sources have come forward and said the family has successfully reintegrated into society, and they are all leading relatively normal and happy lives. As for Joseph, he was quickly given a life sentence, and today he is one of the most hated people in his prison due to the nature of his crimes. He is so hated that in 2016, when he was out in general population, he was attacked by other inmates and had several of his teeth knocked out. And so now prison officials are worried if they leave him in general population, he'll be killed. And so he spends virtually all of his time in solitary confinement. He will be eligible for parole in 2024 when he is 89 years old.
2024? Oh, that's now. How is he eligible for parole? First of all, the irony. Now he's stuck in a box. Second off, 2024. Like what?
What was his name?
Thirdly, hello. Dang, I just forgot what the hell I was gonna say. Thirdly, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Thirdly, you should have left them in general pod. You should have just let them handle it and do it what they do. Just say Joseph and Elizabeth. Oh my gosh. See, I couldn't work in the jail because I would have let him accidentally get to go out there. And I'm like, go get some fresh air. And let them do what they need to do because he definitely deserved more than his teeth knocked out. Definitely more.
Joseph Fritzl.
Oh my gosh, that is so sad.
He can't be alive.
2024. That's now. How old is he?
He's still alive.
89? Jeez.
So he can be let out. He's still alive.
I mean, I feel like, not trying to, maybe allegedly, he might get.
The devil himself gotta be keeping him alive. Ain't no way he should be alive still.
Get him.
Ain't no way this man should be alive.
That's horrible.
He's still
Poor
living.
them. I mean, that she has to live with that. Oh my gosh, them poor kids to know. I wonder if they did tell the kids, like, this was your grandpa, that was my dad, or did they just keep it as, like, this was just a bad man that just was doing bad
I don't even
things?
know how you even, as Elizabeth, I know you gotta say life goes on, but man,
Her kids kept her going. The kids.
How do you?
Her kids kept her going.
How do you live normal after all that?
That is so
That
sad.
gotta be, like, how? That's crazy.
It really is.
This is
That is
sick
sad.
story. This is a sick story.
Definitely let us know what you guys thought about it. And if you do remember what the show is called or documentary is called and you've seen it, let us know down below, because I don't know if it's Room or if it's something else. But I know we've seen it, and it was just really sad. Like, we couldn't sleep. Honestly, we couldn't sleep.
It's messing me up right
last
now
night.
thinking about it. Like, that's crazy to think. Like, your own child.
Like, imagine the guilt the mother had. Imagine the people, especially like that guy that said he was there for 4 years and his dog pretty much gave him, like,
I wonder if her mom's
signals.
still living.
And I'm pretty sure. But I'm saying, like, imagine like that. Like, to know that there was people being...
Because I mean, the mom would have to look
Imagine the siblings that went on about their lives knowing that I'm smiling and dad's looking at me, we're chilling, we're talking, but yet he has our sister.
her whole
doing it.
family. The mom gotta look at those as her husband's kids and with her daughter. Like, that, it's a whole just psychological
It's a
just mess. That's
so
what I'm saying. I
sad.
don't think there's no recovery mentally for this. Like,
I don't know. That's sad. That hurt my heart.
y'all sent over. I'm gonna mess with y'all, Mr. Ballin, because y'all just be just.
But I will say that the show or whatever that we watched it on, it missed a lot of these key
Yeah,
points.
key
A lot of
points.
these facts we did not know. It didn't give, but I'm pretty sure they didn't want to tell everything. But definitely let us know what you guys thought about it.
Yeah. See y'all on the next one.